Hi, welcome to the Queer Talk Show. I'm your co-host, Lauren.
And I'm your other host, Adrian.
And we are your emotional support gays. Or as much as we can be.
And I see you've come crawling back to us.
You've come back for more. We're out of the closet. We're still just as fucked up as last time.
A little less fucked up, though.
A little less fucked up. It's a better day.
It's a better day. For context, this is being recorded the day after Trump lost the presidency and Biden was announced president-elect.
Fucking finally.
Finally, we are not being complacent, but we are taking a big sigh of relief and letting ourselves enjoy the moment for now.
Taking the little victories as they come.
As they come. Yeah, it's been a really tough week. That election lasted that entire week, and it was tiring. There were days where nothing would happen and everybody was just yelling at Nevada for the longest time, and then Pennsylvania was bet. So we've been getting fucked up, but we're okay and we're here to talk about it. One thing I would like to mention, though, for some comedic relief before we get into theory, is this whole Four Seasons debacle, because this shit has had me rolling on the floor crying since I found out about it. So in case you've been living under a rock, essentially what happened is that someone on Trump's, campaign team tried to book the Four Seasons Hotel, which is, this really fancy hotel. I don't know where it is. It's the first time I'd ever heard about it when I found this story, to kind of give a speech and, meet and stuff. And someone fucked up. Either somebody fucked up or somebody fucked with them.
Well, you know what happened.
I don't.
So the Four Seasons is a chain.
Uh-huh.
And Trump just put on his Twitter that he was going to have a press conference at the Four Seasons Hotel. Didn't mark what hotel, didn't mark where, and none of the Four Seasons hotels were aware of this before he tweeted it.
Oh, no.
It was his campaign trying to catch up to the fact that Trump's an idiot.
Exactly. So somebody's shit, I need to rush and book this fucking hotel chain wherever, and some motherfucker, some poor motherfucker accidentally booked a landscaping company. And I heard that and I was like, oh, that's funny, but they're probably gonna fix that. And then I saw a picture on my timeline today of them meeting in front of this shitty little landscaping company building, and I was like, oh my god.
I mean, it reads like an Always Sunny in Philadelphia bit.
It does!
Rudy
Oh my
Giuliani
God.
standing in front of the Four Seasons landscaping company, just being like, no, it's all voter fraud. It's all the voter fraud. And he just looks coked out, and you're like...
That's the same as that one Trumpette, I'll call her. Again, I don't really retain any of these people's names because I don't give a fuck about them. But there was that Trump Pride press conference, and this lady looks so drunk, and she's the LGBTQ, she skips the T, and everybody's
Well, and it's just, every piece of the last couple days of Trump's presidency, of the election, of all of it, just feels like a John Mulaney bit.
Did you see his tweet?
I did.
Yeah.
And stay out!
And stay out! That's so funny.
We've been sitting, wondering what the next terror is gonna hold, and it's not a perfect solution. At best, it's kind of just a stopper on the drain. But,
yeah.
God, it just feels like a weight off my shoulders.
It does. I'm going to let myself breathe. Biden was the first president to ever mention the transgender community in his speech, which was lovely. Jill Biden is the first FLOTUS to ever retain her job after becoming FLOTUS, and she's a doctor, which is really cool. So yeah, there's stuff to be happy about, and I'm gonna let myself be happy before I go back to bullying the president.
I think one of my favorite things, I think it was John Green who brought this up, and I can't stop thinking about it. There is no precedent for what to call the spouse of the vice president if the vice president is a woman. So, on the state level, the spouse of anyone in power has been called the first or second gentleman, but there is no federal precedent for it because this is the first time it's happened. Meaning that Kamala Harris's husband can go by whatever the fuck he wants, and I'm really hoping that since it's been, First Lady, Second Lady, it should really be First Lord, Second Lord. Because it's just, you have such an opportunity here. Lords and ladies, please.
Just make it cool for once.
Just make it fucking cool. I'm all here for Polis's first gentleman, but can we please have Kamala's first lord?
First lord, yeah.
Or second lord.
First, I was about to make a BDSM joke. Anyways.
Go for it.
I was gonna be like, first pet. First bitch boy. Oh, no, bitch boy, baby, sorry.
Emotional Support Gaze is hosted by Adrian and Lauren, neither of whom are experts. That said, we invite you to join us for our queer talk show. Trigger warning should be taken with all episodes, as conversations are freeform and frequently touch on topics that may make listeners and Trump supporters uncomfortable. Thank you for listening.
What do you have for me today, Lauren?
So many things, most of them correlated to Biden. So,
yeah.
Something we didn't really talk about in the last podcast is that over the course of this, we kind of want to take an approach of, whilst cataloging queer identities and queer stories, we also want to talk about gender theory and things like that. The things that ultimately, you know, your College 101 gender class is going to explain your life to you if you're a trans person in nice, fancy academic terms, but college is not accessible. And a lot of the point of this podcast is to make other people's experiences accessible to people who maybe aren't going to college, to people who aren't maybe living at home, who don't have the same opportunities, and we want to make those things accessible.
Yeah, not a whole lot of Americans read theory, you know?
Exactly.
Or have the opportunity or the privilege or the accessibility to read theory.
Right, and I don't think we have to always live in theory, but it's good to see it applied. And something that I've been thinking a lot about as we get into Biden being elected and Biden's eventual presidency, COVID willing, is the application of really radical leftist theory to this presidency. Radical leftist Twitter is a fucking mess when it comes to this presidency, because you have about half of it right now that's very much like, well, take the small win, you know, we have a president we can bully, and a lot who are very frustrated because it's a colonial dictator-in-chief. Both are really valid perspectives, and it draws back to a lot of these ideas that Audre Lorde puts forth. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. Specifically Audre Lorde's assertion that the Master's tools will never dismantle the Master's house. So, do you know Audre Lorde at all?
I do. I did take Gender 101 my sophomore year of college, which was just a year ago. I don't remember a whole lot of it. I do remember really enjoying the Master's tools. Manifesto almost, you know? I really liked that bit, but it's been a while, so please refresh me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Audre Lorde is a black feminist who's writing around the 1970s, 1980s. She has a series of speeches, essays, and at her core, she is a poet. She is a poet, a communist, a lesbian, a black feminist. She embodies these movements that at the time were relatively fringe to radical feminism in both of its forms, libertarian and cultural, and dissents heavily from liberal feminism, which is a lot of what we as a culture have kind of ended up in. Audre Lorde also creates a lot of the basis for what we know as intersectional feminism. So intersectional feminism is this idea that you can't necessarily judge a person's experience based off of one identity. A person's experience is built off of all of their identities combined. I am not just affected by being a trans woman. I am affected by being a white trans woman. I'm affected by being a trans woman and a woman. I am affected by being a queer trans woman, sexuality-wise. You know, there is no way to view one identity at a time when you are discussing the discourse that surrounds personal experience and lived experience of the individual. And that's a lot of what Audre Lorde starts to get into, but she's also a very radical, almost anarchical communist, which makes her works really interesting. She starts to theorize, almost in poetry, well, often in poetry, the idea of what a non-colonized, non-subjugated world would look like. And she travels the world. She has essays on Soviet Russia and Cuba, and she talks about the implementations of the Soviet system almost with some fervor. She almost seems to agree with a lot of them, or points out their flaws in the same breath that she points out the flaws of an American system, and where they're combined. So she's this really, really influential feminist, and I'm sure she's going to come up about a dozen times because she's also my personal hero. The book that she is best known for is Sister Outsider, which is just a collection of her speeches, essays, poetry, etc. And what I kind of want to talk about is her most famous assertion is the Master's tools will never dismantle the Master's house, which you mentioned before.
Yeah, that I remember learning about that and realizing, I think reading that sort of radicalized me even more past what I thought was already possible. You know, I was already pretty radicalized at this point, but I was like, oh shit, yeah. You can't really dismantle a system. The way I interpret it was like, you can't dismantle a system from working inside such a system, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, it's how, you know, during the George Floyd riots, I remember seeing so many cops being like, but there are good cops. And it's like, no, there aren't, because you're still a cop and you're still working inside a system. They're like, but what if you can change the system from the inside? And, you know, I think Spike Lee does a really good job of showing why that's not possible. And if you've never seen Black Klansman by Spike Lee, I'm a film buff, by the way. That's my contribution to this conversation.
Film buff and a gender studies minor, sit down.
Yeah.
That's just every podcast on the internet.
Pretty much. But basically, there's, you know, at the end, there's this scene where, you know, the whole story is about this black cop who goes about and infiltrates the KKK and ends up, like, doing some really, really integral work to dismantling the KKK in Colorado Springs at the time. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it, you know, he's still a rookie cop, you know, and he leads this, like, giant investigation. And at the end of it, his chief in police tells him to destroy all the evidence.
Right.
So what that sort of embodies is that no matter where you are sitting in the system, you're always going to have a boss. And your boss is always going to either, like, tell you to do something horrible, you know, something terrible that the system has been doing for eons and decades, and you're either going to get fired or you're going to have to do it. And through that, you sort of become brainwashed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what she gets into. Without, like, directly quoting it, that's essentially the starting point. And Sister Outsider is the book that radicalized me. I give it full credit of this was my second gender studies class when I read her poem about the Master's tools will not dismantle the Master's house. And I remember reading that, and then I went and bought Sister Outsider the week after that because I was like, this seems like a good area to start reading, and it totally soured me against postmodern feminism.
Woo!
But yeah, so what she's getting at is this idea of systems are self-replicating. You know, something that we deal with in the 21st century and in any Western society, but especially America, which is obviously where the bulk of my discussion is going to come from because that's my lived experience. Systems are there to self-replicate. They are designed to be unfuckable. You know, you can't destroy the system from the inside, or at least it's not as easy to do. Mm-hmm. And what she is getting at is very much the idea of the police, and it's a really good example to start there of, yes, there are probably cops that are good people, but those good people are still allowing those bad things to happen. One bad apple sours the whole bunch, you know? So how does this get applied to Biden? Then. Any thoughts?
I think this is definitely a huge thing that's super being discussed on Twitter right now. But I think a lot of people, a lot of older white liberals, you know, liberal boomers, if you will, I know a couple personally, so they, after this presidency being announced, they are going to be like, oh, haha, fascism is over, and, like, racism doesn't exist anymore, and it's like, that's not true. So what needs to be realized is that while Biden is a somewhat competent president and, you know, a democratic president and, you know, is hitting a lot of marks and is not the horror fascist that was Trump, he's still the system.
Right. Biden, in Lorde's words, is very much one of the master's tools. He is a product of a system that is set to self-replicate and benefit the people who created it, which in this case would be the founding fathers, so cisgender, straight, white men.
Exactly. So just because Biden was elected president doesn't mean that, everything's gonna go back to normal immediately, and that, black people aren't gonna still be killed by cops, that cops won't still just act like executioners all the time, or that, I don't know what's gonna happen to the fucking concentration camps at the border, the hysterectomies.
Right, and I think what's even more terrifying to look at, and where Lorde's theory starts to become applied to this, is I don't even think it's that things won't go back to normal, I think it's that things will start to go back to normal. And the fear is when employing the master's systems, or the master's tools against the master's systems, you are functionally just fixing the system to work exactly the way it was designed to. Those tools will never turn against the people they benefit. In the same sense of, the hammer is never going to come back and hit me in the face unless I'm really, really fucking up with a hammer, which I have done.
Yeah.
But that system is going to continue to work exactly the way it is designed to work so long as it is lubricated and continued.
Yeah, like the master's tools have been, engineered to only provide and embolden and, support the master.
Exactly. Which gets into a lot of the problems that specifically leftist Twitter is starting to point out. And I'm certainly guilty of being probably a little more, I say a little because I'm nowhere near the conservative side of a political spectrum, but I'm certainly a little more conservative than a lot of anarchist Twitter tends to be. Mm-hmm. There is still good to be found in a Biden presidency. And I think that that's a lot of the takeaway that those moderate Democrats, especially the boomer moderate Democrats, are trying to get at. What a lot of the leftists are trying to get at right now is we aren't going to fix the system with just Biden alone, and that's where Lorde's theories need to start to be applied. And we were talking about this earlier in the introduction, the idea of bullying the president. I'm ready to get back to bullying the president successfully.
Exactly.
The nice thing about Biden is he's a president that will listen. He is still a tool of the system, but he is someone that will actually listen to some of us. It's why trans people got mentioned in his opening speech. It's why so many of moderate Republicans were actually willing to vote for Biden. He's not the worst thing to happen. He's not the most insidious tool we could have. And he's certainly not as bad as Trump by any extent. But something that was good about Trump is that Trump mobilized a whole group of people. Trump exposed the system for what it is, and Trump went through and showed us that the system is completely and utterly broken. There's problems in the system that need to be approached through multifaceted lenses, and ironically exposed the intersectional way of dealing with this. He exposed the lines between where the Women's March and Black Lives Matter movements combine. Mm-hmm. He was the reason why we have seen the two largest political demonstrations in our country's history in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's really big.
So a lot of the fear right now that leftist Twitter is running into is running with specifically this idea of the master's tools. They're afraid that moderate liberals are going to move back into that kind of place they were with Obama, which is, we solved racism in the 60s. It's all over. We did it. We did it, Reddit.
Oh my god, yeah, there was I remember I saw a TikTok of this girl being like, here's why the system actually isn't racist. And she's like, in the 60s, the Civil Rights Act passed and racism was made illegal. And I was like, is this a joke? And she was being completely unironic. And I was like, no!
Well, and that's kind of the thing. So the reason I bring up Audre Lorde for this one, the reason why I'm kind of spotlighting her, is because there is a middle ground to this. Biden is absolutely a tool of the system. He is still part of the problem. Colonialist in chief is absolutely an accurate representation of what the American system looks like, or what the United States American system looks like. The thing to take from that, though, is that same energy that we've had from the past few years, we need to be reapplying to a Biden presidency. We can't become complacent, because at the end of the day, we got rid of one tool. That's all we did, is we threw out the hammer and now we have the screwdriver. Mm-hmm. The screwdriver is a little less dangerous. The screwdriver is a lot harder to fuck up, but we don't want the screwdriver to put back together the hammer functionally. Exactly. And I think that gets to the core of a lot of specifically leftist fear right now of what if this rebuilds itself. And honestly gets to a lot of right-wing fear too of what if the left builds the same thing? Which I think are valid concerns, if a little short-sighted.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I think, I'm kind of with you where, it's better to have a screwdriver than a hammer, and we just need to work on getting the screwdriver to not bring back the hammer, to revive it, if you will. I don't know. I think we need to, as much as we do need to work on Biden not being complacent himself, I think we need to hold each other accountable. I think right now we also just need to focus on the people around us and make sure that, like, the people that we were marching with in June don't just remain silent. Because, that's kind of where we were during the Obama presidency. We were, politics were boring back then.
Well, because, I remember Ferguson.
Exactly.
And looking at it as, I don't really understand this issue. I'm a 14-year-old white kid growing up in a white suburb of Denver.
Me too, yeah.
I don't know what the fuck is going on in Ferguson. I don't get it. Oh god, that's kind of complicated. I think I'm just gonna not say anything.
Exactly. And now we need to hold. I think this is more just coming from what I personally want to do, is that I want to, as much as I also want to bully Biden, I kind of want to bully the people around me a bit, which sounds so bad, but I'm sure most people listening to this understand where it's like, I'm going to hold my family accountable, I'm going to hold teachers, my peers, people around me who are like, oh, well, this is fine now, and it's like, no, it's fucking not, like, this is a good step in the right direction, but at the same time, like, we have so much fucking work to do, and the fact that you're being complacent means that you're privileged. I remember, and this is gonna sound like a call out, but get over it, in the height of the Black Lives Matter protests in June, a group of people I know had not spoken up at all. We're not posting anything to social media. They're all white. And they all of a sudden, like, in the height of the protest, me and my friends were, like, all in Denver, screaming our lungs off. And I see that these people, like, posted a bunch of pictures of them camping. And I'm worried I'm gonna see stuff like that again, and they're gonna think it's not as bad because, like, Biden's president now, and it's like, no, don't go camping, and, like, this is more of a metaphor, but, like, don't go camping, don't go vacationing, There's still work to be done, and I want everybody to be as politically active as they were this year than, like, for the next 4 years of this presidency, I don't want people to just sit back and chill, and I'm kind of, like, just ranting right now, but one more point I want to bring up is that another positive I see in Biden's presidency is a sort of, like, trickle-down ideology. Where now that Biden's president, it kind of reminds, and, like, he's hitting points and he's like trying to uplift the voices of the marginalized people around him. Emphasis on trying, I'm not painting Biden as, like, a saint of marginalized people. I think it might, like, help some people change a little better, like, I see it as a way of, like, how representative media, shows like Pose and whatnot, Sense8, kind of helped people either realize things about themselves or, like, become more liberal. And I think that Biden will help change the minds of centrists, potentially, or I see change in ideology now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's ultimately, to me, that is one of the best parts possible of a Biden presidency. I don't know if I'm as optimistic about it. But Biden did exactly what he promised the Democrats, which is he flipped moderate Republicans blue. Doing that is difficult in and of itself because ultimately the difference between a far-right Republican and a moderate Republican is whether they're being racist because they think it's for economic reasons or if they're being racist because they think it's the right thing to be. Flipping moderate Republicans is huge. And it's going to make people more communally minded. It's going to push people to rethink the way that they've structured politics. I mean, honestly, Biden feels like a return to Bill Clinton. It's kind of a moderate Democratic presidency that almost runs Republican.
Yeah, no, that's funny that you say that, because I remember hearing people who, like, lived through Clinton's presidency and were like, yeah, he seemed like a cool guy. Like, if reporters would ask him what his favorite food was, and he'd be like, I don't know, fries. I'm definitely quoting John Mulaney right now. But, like, to that generation, he seemed like such a cool, laid-back president. And one of my friends today, or I think yesterday, said something very similar similar to that. And I was like, oh no, this is another Clinton presidency, you know?
I mean, my favorite joke about Bill Clinton is he's the best Republican president we ever had.
True.
He's not a Republican, but his policies were very, very moderate and very easy to sway one way or another.
Yeah.
Which ultimately tends to be kind of the hallmark of a lot of Democrats. But
and now our goal here is to not let ourselves sway.
Exactly.
You know, we need to be sturdy. We need to be upheld by ourselves.
We need to start restructuring the system. We need to start looking at it and saying we aren't trying to fix the system, we are trying to redesign it. And I think that there are a lot of ways to do that. You know, any good anarcho-communist worth their salt is going to say, hey, violent revolution time. And if you have a red army, that's great. But
we don't have an army.
At this time, no. And so, in that meantime, we need to be focusing on mutual aid, mutual education. We need to be trying to destroy the systems and the tools of the Master's House and re-implementing new ideas, new things that are going to help, frankly, prevent another fascist from coming into office.
Exactly. No, like, we need to remember that a lot of states still went red. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people still fucking voted for Trump. This, unfortunately, was still a fucking close race.
And at the end of the day, it was like 60-40. 4 in every 10 people you meet, 2 in every 5 probably voted for Trump.
Which is horrible, you know? Like, it's still, we need to remember that while America chose, you know, quote-unquote chose, quote-unquote America, Biden, a lot of people still wanted Trump. A lot of people went red, and we need to not let those people slink into the shadows because, you know, he won, you know?
Exactly.
It's still horrifying, and we still, you know?
Yeah. And I think that a lot of my approach to this is probably almost a misrepresentation of Lorde's ideas. I think that she would be a little more radical than I am on this.
Yeah.
In that same breath, she gives us a really good jumping off point for that action that I think moderate people are going to find palatable, while also giving us the language and the terms and the ideas and the action to actually make legitimate change in this country.
Yep.
You know, and I think for a good example of a bullyable politician, look to Jared Polis. Yep. You know, Jared Polis is one of the most easily bullied politicians I've ever seen. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing, well, I actually have a couple things against Jared Polis, but for the purposes of a queer podcast, I have nothing against Jared Polis other than his politics.
Yeah.
At the same time, bullying Jared Polis in the entirety of Denver for, 2 weeks got a police accountability passed across the state.
Yep.
We were able to push politicians to sign a bill that got rid of qualified immunity in Colorado. We got body cams required, which, granted, the smaller cities on the outskirts of Denver are having a hell of a time trying to figure out how they're going to do it without defunding the police, which I think is hysterical. But in that same breath, that points out exactly what we need to be aiming for. We need to be putting new things into the system that are not the Master's tools, that redefine who the Master is and what those tools are. And that can be done multiple ways. That can be done through radical action, that can be done through Twitter bullying a politician until he says, okay, fine, you know? But at the end of the day, we need to be working on dismantling that house.
Yeah, that's the Master's tools.
Which I'm sure will come up more often than just today. It just seems particularly timely a topic.
Yes, absolutely. Boy, oh boy, can't wait to bully the president. Also, can I just say that I know Kamala Harris is a cop, you know, ACAB, but holy shit, a woman of color is in the VP spot.
And yet another pushable politician.
Yeah.
I mean, she's changed her stance. I know the big outcry on Twitter with her is that she was putting trans women in men's prisons when she was the DA. Uh-huh. That's a perfectly valid critique. She has changed her position really heavily on trans people since then. I think people can change.
Yeah, I think specifically these people can change.
I think so too.
Trump was not capable of change.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Pence was not capable of change.
Pence was too capable of too many things that I didn't want him to be capable of.
Exactly. I'm honestly, I'm really glad Pence is out of there, specifically, because he was a really, really stressful addition to the presidency. But yeah.
Yeah.
We're heading in the right direction. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, guys.
There's a light.
Over at the Frankenstein place.
And we have the first Rocky Horror reference for the show.
Woo!
I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Not really. Other than personally, I would like to announce that I've decided to start HRT.
How's that going?
It's going. I emailed a therapist yesterday, and now I'm just waiting to hear back. But yeah, I'm kind of starting that journey of, like, going to a therapist, talking about my gender dysphoria, hopefully getting diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and then starting to microdose on testosterone.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm really, really hype about it. So wish me luck, guys.
What are the benefits of microdosing testosterone over a full dose of it? And we can talk about this in a later episode if we want, but I'm just curious since it's happening right now.
For me personally, it's because I don't identify as a trans man. I identify non-binary, genderqueer. Microdosing is beneficial to me because one, it's in the first couple of months it is reversible. So if I don't like it, I can stop and be fine and, not have any of those effects last super long. At the same time, it will give me like a taste of what that's going to look like. And also at the same time, I mentioned that I'm not a trans man. I don't think I necessarily want to present, super traditionally masculinely. That's not really my goal, and that's not how I identify. So I don't think the full dosage of testosterone will do to my body what I want it to do.
Okay.
But I do want to combat, because I also have an IUD, and IUD adds more estrogen and progesterone to my body. And lately that has been making me really dysphoric because, like, I've been gaining weight and, having a lot of mood swings lately, and I feel like I've been getting, like, curvier, and that's really not what I want to look like, and that's not how I identify. So I want to also use this testosterone to combat that and also just start transitioning because, if this has been, like, kind of a very recent, sudden thing, I guess, but recently I decided, I can't continue living with people assuming that I'm a woman.
Yeah.
So here I am.
Fair enough.
Yee.
Well, I'm super excited for you.
Thank you.
And I am glad that I get to watch you through this journey.
Yeah.
We definitely need to have just like a whole day where we talk about hormones and shit on this podcast.
Oh, totally. Once I start, we can really get into it. Yeah.
What's your gender of the day today, Adrian?
Oh, shit. My gender of the day is I want to say it's the Pennsylvania pride flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean the Philly pride flag?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Sorry, I didn't know it was specifically Philadelphia.
I think it is. I could totally be wrong.
But yeah, the Philly pride flag, that includes a bunch of other colors than just the rainbow.
Someone in the reviews is going to be like, Lauren's a complete dick. I like that.
Nice. My
gender of the day is the polycule next door and a mimosa with triple sec in it.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you for tuning into Emotional Support, Gaze.
And we'll catch you in a couple weeks.
Yee.
Emotional Support Gaze is produced, hosted, and directed by Lauren and Adrian. Editing is done by Lauren Scully, and the artwork is courtesy of Adrian Snyder. The title music for ESG this week was Not Your Call by Brendan McLean, and the closing music was Cis Girls by Dyke Drama. ESG does not own the rights to any of the music utilized throughout the podcast and thanks the artist kindly for not suing us. If you have questions for us? Disagree with something we said? Want to meet us in an abandoned Kohl's for episode 3? Catch up with us and leave a review wherever you get podcasts, and keep tweeting at #ESGpod. It really does help. And as always, be gay, do crime. You're the first slut
of the United States, obviously.
What the fuck?
That's funny.
Yes, welcome to Emotional Support Gaze. I am your co-host, and this is my first slut.
Adrian. That's so funny. Anyways.